8 minutes to 7, and we're looking at this story now, with today over 40% of the world's population living in countries that spend more on debt servicing than on health or education. This crisis is especially acute in Africa, where 20 low-income countries are in or near debt distress. At the heart of this imbalance lies a structural flaw in the global financial system. Africa is consistently overcharged for access to capital, to money. South Africa, holding the presidency of the G20 this year, has made debt sustainability a key priority for our country's term. Let's speak now to Bill Blackie, who's the CEO at Standard Bank Business and Commercial Banking, about the summit that was held today, Financing Africa Forward, hosted by Standard Bank, to explore ways to lower the cost of capital in Africa. I'm interested, Bill, thanks for joining us on Power Business and welcome to the show. The Financing Africa Forward Summit placed the cost of capital at the center of Africa's development conversation. Why now? What is the timing of this?
Brilliant. Thank you. And it's so good to speak to you this evening. A great question to start with, I think. The starting point really is that South Africa is obviously hosting the B20 and the G20. And Sim, our chief executive, is playing a very active role in that. So the principle here is that actually Africa has very significant potential, but to unlock that potential, it needs very significant investment in infrastructure. And at the heart of that, of course, it's where do you raise the money from? Where do you raise the capital from? Africa has a proportion of that capital, has some of that capital, but the remainder it needs to raise from the developed markets and the larger markets in the world. And in that context, then, your cost of capital becomes essential to the discussion. And so this is about a preemptive engagement, about bringing like-minded people together to help Africa work through the key initiatives to actually bring down our cost of capital over time.
So can you help us understand how a continent like Africa, with relatively low debt levels compared to major economies, ends up paying so much more to borrow? So just to give the listeners an indication, so debt to GDP levels in South Africa around 69%, 45% in Nigeria, 70% in Kenya. And then if we look at the US, it's 96%, Japan 155%, the UK 92%.
Yeah, and that's at the heart of the point, isn't it? And I think you've captured it perfectly. What we're trying to focus on is that all of the models that design the backing to the decisions around cost of capital rely on multiple data points. At the moment, while a lot of that is available, if you think of the US or Europe or China, the quantity of data that they have to start the decision making here is substantially deeper than what we have. And so first starting point is to make sure that you've got the right data getting into the right hands. The second and most important is actually just to build understanding. It's like ultimately it's about human behavior, isn't it? When you understand something deeply and have a close association and relationship with it, you'll be less conservative with your decision making. And so making sure that we support that process, support the rating agencies, get them much closer to the on-the-ground growth that we see every day in the countries in which we operate.
South Africa is pushing for fairer sovereign credit ratings, which of course would lower the risk premium and would lower the cost of capital. And you mentioned that one of the ways would be to get the ratings agency closer to the ground, closer to understanding the realities. How do you think that would work in practice?
Yeah, it's a lot of it has to do with relationship building and time and presence. So we're conscious that some of the rating agencies have in fact bolstered their capacity in South Africa and Africa recently, and we think that's a great initiative. But there's no substitute for just spending time on the ground. For ourselves as Standard Bank, of course, we're present in 20 of the African markets, and we've got people on the ground working in those communities, really understanding them and helping us to make decisions. And so that's what we will really be initiating.
Ghana and Zambia are using the G20's common framework for restructuring their debt, but there's been slow progress on that. So what does that signal for other countries who may want to also move towards a common framework or use some of those principles?
Yeah, I think those are two interesting examples. If you look at the Ghana restructuring, they were largely dependent on the work of the European institutions and the US institutions. And so the outcome in Ghana has actually taken quite a long time to finalize in the context of it being largely a sort of a bilateral engagement. In Zambia, it was quite different because, of course, they had quite significant debt and exposure to China. And so you ended up with multiple parties in that negotiation. And net, I think if you look at it, Zambia is probably likely to come out of that restructuring more quickly than Ghana. And so a lot of this actually talks to the heart of what we're talking about tonight, and that is making sure that you have multiple relationships, multiple understandings, and a depth of knowledge.
Yeah. So one of the reforms that was cited is also domestic capital. That's the role that institutions like Standard Bank would play.
Yeah. So certainly South Africa has a great dividend in the sense that it's got big financial institutions that have deep pools of capital. And if you look at the financial institutions, the big banks, the big insurers, the big asset managers, and of course the likes of the government pension fund, they have the capacity to play a very material role in the infrastructure build in South Africa.
So South Africa is lucky in that regard. Do we see then that South Africa's, that actually translate into South Africa having lower debt servicing costs?
Yeah, without a doubt. Just because of its rating, its credit rating, South Africa has lower debt servicing costs than many other African countries. Of course, there are one or two of them that are a grade above us. But South Africa is relatively well positioned, but we could be better. And that's the point of having these kind of engagements.
Thanks very much. That's Bill Blackie, the CEO of Standard Bank Business and Commercial Banking. And just after the news headlines, we'll be speaking on the Power Boardroom about slaying stereotypes and the role of appearance and biases in government.